We have to convert swords into plowshares, and we have to give up the whole business of war. When people take up their hammers and hammer these weapons, that's when the weapons cease to exist. Weapons that have no right to exist stop existing when we become the instruments of their non-existence. And I think that that's, in a simple way, what civil disobedience is about. You blockade the war makers, you sit down in front of their operations to stop their operations. You stop war by stopping war, by getting in the way of the military machinery. And that's something very simple to do, but it's also very dangerous and complicated.
I've come to the realization that the power of nonviolent direct action rests on two things. It rests on the willingness to undergo suffering rather than inflict it, and that's a quote from Wally Nelson's wonderful definition of nonviolence. But it also comes from the embracing of a paradox, that if you sit in the front of a bus, or if you sit down at a segregated lunch counter, or if you go to the sea to gather salt, you're simultaneously saying yes and saying no. You're saying, no, this law is wrong, and I'm going to violate it because it's wrong. But you're also saying, yes, everyone should be able to do this. And sitting down in the road on Gibson Avenue in Albuquerque and on Diamond Drive in Los Alamos, I don't actually think that anybody, for any reason, should be able to block traffic. If somebody blocks traffic for the cause of cruel treatment to animals, or for Nazism, or for, you know, some other thing that I wouldn't approve of, I would condemn the action. So I think the action itself has to have value in and of itself.
When I do activism, I like to be able to bring my spirituality there, to not just protest against things, but to do it in a way that involves creativity, involves joy, involves acknowledgement of this larger energy field that we're all part of. So we often do ritual as part of our actions.
We have to, in the words of the IWW, in the words of the Catholic worker movement, we have to build the new society within the shell of the old. And economically, we have to look in the mirror. We have to look in the mirror and see what we are doing, because I can't necessarily stop what George Bush is doing. I can't necessarily stop what the IMF or the World Bank are doing, but I can stop my participation in the economic system that they sustain.
And the funny thing is, everybody believes in peace and freedom, even the President of the United States. Peace and freedom, brother. But you take peace and freedom to what it really means, pacifism and anarchism, and everybody becomes frightened. So, but that'll be chaos. And I think us anarchists today are trying to prove that it isn't chaos.
Mm-hmm. Because anarchism is not a philosophy of disorganization or chaos. It is a philosophy of voluntary organization, of consensus, of people working together. It is not against the idea of social order, it's against the idea of social coercion. So the part of the whole vision of a radical way of life is life on the land. And Ammon did that in Arizona when he did irrigating and so on. And he did irrigating, pruning, and things like that. Taxes were not withheld from agricultural workers at the time.
When we talk about the trillions of dollars that have been spent for these weapons, for these bombs, for the wars, it takes money to do that. And if they don't get the money, they're not going to be able to do it.
The red area is what portion of your tax dollars that you pay to the government go to past, present, and future wars. And then the other shaded area is civilian. Ammon Hennacy was a person who thought outside the box and who acted, even if he was alone in the action, he would be there. He showed up.
He certainly wrote the income tax people and said, here's what I owe, see if you can get it. And of course you can't squeeze water out of a stone. He really had very little, so Internal Revenue never got the money.
You don't create change by doing something one day a month or one day a year. It has to be your whole life.
And so it hurts sometimes to see people filing into churches, engaging in piety together on a Sunday, and yet bankrolling, paying for the kind of weaponry, the kind of destruction, the kind of bloodletting and killing that is exactly the opposite of what Jesus had preached.
And Ammon was great at pointing out the hypocrisy of those who are what he called pacifists between wars, or like being vegetarians between meals, he said. So nonviolence is a broader concept. The one-person revolution occurs when I say, I have sovereignty over my own life. I'm responsible to God or to nature for my conduct, how I live, what I do. I have no power over other people. I don't want to have power or control over other people because that's not revolutionary. And we build that revolution one brick at a time. See? One brick at a time. And you gotta knock off all the accretions that stand in the way of the brick working.
In England, the campaign for nuclear disarmament used the semaphore signals for the letters N and D, as in nuclear disarmament. N and D. Later, the peace movement turned this symbol into one for peace instead of simply nuclear abolition.
Gandhi certainly is a hero of mine. I think that Gandhi lived up to his beliefs and the beliefs of nonviolence. He also lived extremely simply, so he did not take advantage of other people.
Ammon had written to Mohandas Gandhi, and Mohandas Gandhi wrote back,
I'm sorry to say, however, that I am not always able to carry out my belief into practice. It is my constant endeavor to do so. I find it very difficult, living in the midst of temptation, to enforce my belief in full. Yours sincerely, M.K. Gandhi.
I suppose Ammon Hennacy is one of my heroes. He certainly lived up to his beliefs. I have been involved in nonviolent civil disobedience on a few occasions.
Back in December 1969, Alcatraz was a defining moment for many, many Indian people. It was a catalyst that began a movement throughout this country, which resulted in many Indian people retaining their dignity, regaining their pride and self-esteem, and their return to the tribal traditions, practices, and customs. I myself made a trip and a visit, a pilgrimage of sorts, to San Francisco, the Bay Area, and Alcatraz Island.
What type of struggle are we in? We're in the struggle to demonstrate freedom. And freedom, you don't vote for it, you don't shoot for it, you don't tell other people what to do about it. Freedom is what you do yourself. And no one said you're going to have it either time because you insist on being free.
We are in a period that will be dark for many, many days, and the war like on Afghanistan, the war on Iraq, the war on terror, which has many, many facets and is played out on a daily basis in many parts of the world, including in the United States, is continuing to intensify, and it makes all of the work that people have been doing for social justice on a daily basis more difficult, and it also makes the need to step up at crisis moments greater, but all the time more and more people are getting engaged in political work.
But the general public felt something was possible in '68 that isn't possible now. And they taught that to their children. And they got a whole generation of people who felt nothing is possible now. And then a new generation came. The young people are saying, what do you mean I'm born too late? I'm here now. I'm going to create the world I want, and I'm not going to say, oh, that was possible then, but it's not possible now. It is possible now.
I felt that it was possible to actually destroy the capitalist imperialist system.
Judy Berry worked here in Northern California on forest defense, and she tried to bring forest defenders and loggers together and was pretty effective in that.
What everybody has been asking me for the last 2 days is like, how do you organize timber workers? How do you organize loggers? How do you get loggers to talk about this? And the first answer is you have to like loggers. That's the first thing, and I already did. The conditions of my life are actually more similar to them than to the privileged environmentalists in the city. So the espresso-sucking pavement dwellers, as we call them. But so being from a rural area myself and being a working class person myself, I can relate.
The Earth First activists, I know lots and lots of them who are up in the trees and daily facing incredible violence from the forest companies. I just think they're the most amazing people around. When I was a teenager, it was in the 60s. It was that time when everybody was searching spiritually. I had a very strong Jewish upbringing and very good grounding in that tradition. But what I found was that my own real spiritual experiences happened in nature. And one of the things permaculture teaches us to do is to look at patterns, and look at patterns in nature. And that's something I think that indigenous people have always done. If you look around, you see the patterns in the trees and the leaves and the branches. It's the same pattern that you'll see in a river system or in the veins of your own arm or your hands and fingers. It transfers something. It's a pattern of flow. It's a pattern of collecting and concentrating and dispersing.
The way I look at it is God is a God of peace and love, who created the whole beautiful earth and the stars and the sun and the moon and the universe. It's just magnificent creation, the animals and the birds and humans. It's all this great beauty. Jesus is the incarnation of this beautiful creator God. And his whole message is love one another and be peaceful to one another, not only to all human beings, but actually to creation itself. And, he talks about look at the birds, look at the lilies of the field, and he's trying to teach us about, you know, trusting in God and not worrying. And see, God takes care of the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. The first thing that I find so moving about that is because to say something like that, you have to be a contemplative who thinks about the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. How many of us do that? Jesus was a contemplative who was in awe of the beauty of creation.
The reason that I could even be in Earth First, I'm really a movement person. I've been an Earth Firster for 2 years, and I've been in the movement for 20 years. And I've been in all aspects of the movement, the peace movement, labor movement, you know, everything, and anti-nuclear, etc. And the reason why I would even choose Earth First to work with, besides, well, the radicalism, the sense of humor, the music, but the decentralization is one of the things about Earth First that really appealed to me.
There was a group that unfortunately called themselves anarchists, which were known as the Black Bloc. And they were quite the opposite of us pacifist anarchists. They were violent anarchists. And they took over all the headlines.
Ammon's idea was that if you were inclined towards anarchism, that you really needed to be a pacifist at the same time, which meant that you needed to be peaceful towards everybody that you met, and you needed to give nobody cause.